Emma had always believed that love was the most beautiful gift in the world. She grew up watching her parents, Margaret and James, share a quiet and steady marriage. Her father would open the door for her mother, and her mother would laugh softly at his little jokes. To Emma, this was what she thought marriage would be: gentle, caring, and filled with kindness. When she met Richard, it seemed as though her prayers had been answered. He was everything a woman could dream of: tall, handsome, charming, and smooth with words. From the very first moment, he swept her off her feet. "I've been waiting for someone like you all my life," Richard told her on their second date, staring into her eyes as if she was the only woman in the world. Emma's cheeks turned red. "Oh, Richard, you barely know me." "I don't need to know everything," he replied with a confident smile. "I just know you're the one." He bought her flowers, sent her sweet messages every morning, and never failed to tell her how beautiful she looked. To her friends, he seemed like a dream man. To her family, he appeared respectful and caring. Even her mother, Margaret, had said, "Emma, he looks like a gentleman. I think you've made a good choice." It didn't take long for Richard to propose. He got down on one knee in a fancy restaurant, a diamond ring sparkling in the light, and asked, "Emma, will you make me the happiest man alive?" Tears filled her eyes as she whispered, "Yes." Their wedding was everything Emma had ever dreamed of. Flowers everywhere, music in the air, friends and family cheering. As she stood in her white dress, looking at Richard at the altar, she thought to herself, "This is my forever. This is my safe place." But forever was about to look very different from what she imagined. The first 3 months of marriage were blissful for Emma. Richard kissed her goodbye every morning, helped her with groceries, and told her how lucky he was to have her. Emma felt secure, certain she had married the man of her dreams. But one evening, as she served him dinner, the unexpected happened. Richard dipped his spoon into the soup, tasted it, and slammed the spoon on the table. "What is this?" he snapped. Emma froze. "It's chicken soup. Is something wrong with it?" "It's salty." His voice was sharp, almost frightening. "I'm so sorry, Richard," Emma stammered. "I must have added too much salt." Before she could say more, his hand struck her cheek. The sound echoed in the room. Emma dropped the serving spoon and held her face, stunned. Richard's expression softened immediately. "Emma, baby, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. I don't know what came over me." Emma stood there, trembling. She had never been hit before, not by anyone, least of all the man she loved. He came closer, hugging her tightly. "Please forgive me. It will never happen again. I promise." Emma wanted to believe him. She nodded slowly, her eyes wet. "Okay, I forgive you." But in her heart, something had cracked. The following days, Emma tried to push the incident out of her mind. Richard was back to being the sweet man she fell in love with. He showered her with gifts, kissed her forehead, and even apologized again. Yet, deep inside, Emma felt uneasy. When she looked in the mirror, she saw faint bruises on her cheek. She dabbed makeup to hide it before going to visit her mother, Margaret. "Emma, are you okay?" Margaret asked, noticing her daughter's uneasy smile. "Yes, Mum," Emma said quickly. "I just haven't been sleeping well." Her mother touched her arm gently. "Marriage isn't always easy. Just make sure you're truly happy." Emma forced a smile. "I am, Mum. Don't worry." But when she went home that night, Richard was pacing in the living room. "Why were you at your mum's for so long? Were you complaining about me?" Emma blinked. "No, Richard. I would never." Before she could finish, his hand gripped her wrist tightly. "Don't lie to me." Tears pricked Emma's eyes. "I'm not lying. I promise." He released her, then sighed deeply. "You know I love you, Emma, but you must always put me first, not your mother." Emma nodded quickly, her heart sinking. She began to wonder if love was supposed to feel like this. Emma began living a double life. On the outside, she was the cheerful wife everyone thought was blessed with a perfect husband. On the inside, she was a woman covering bruises with scarves, foundation, and excuses. When her best friend, Laura, asked her one afternoon, "Emma, what happened to your arm? Did you hurt yourself?" Emma smiled faintly. "Oh, I slipped while cleaning." Laura didn't push, but her eyes lingered with suspicion. Emma prayed no one would discover her secret. Richard had a strange way of mixing love with cruelty. One evening he bought her a gold necklace and clasped it around her neck, whispering, "You're mine, Emma. Forever mine." That same night, when she asked him why he came home late, he shoved her against the wall. Emma trembled, but the next morning he was all apologies and kisses. She began to confuse love with fear, wondering if maybe she was the problem. Margaret grew more suspicious each week. She noticed Emma's pale face and the way her hands shook when she spoke about Richard. "Emma," her mother said firmly one Sunday, "tell me the truth. Is Richard hurting you?" Emma's eyes filled with tears, but she quickly wiped them. "No, Mum. I'm fine. Honestly." She wasn't ready to admit the nightmare she lived in. One evening, Emma's neighbor, Mrs. Carter, heard loud shouting and banging through the walls. The next day, she knocked gently on Emma's door. "Are you all right, dear? I thought I heard something." Emma forced a smile. "Oh, I dropped a plate, that's all." Mrs. Carter didn't believe her, but Emma closed the door quickly, terrified Richard would find out. Richard's abuse became a cycle Emma could almost predict. He would lose his temper over something small, hit her, then beg for forgiveness. "Emma, you know I love you," he'd say while holding her hand. "It's just, I get angry sometimes. But I'll change." She wanted to believe him, so she stayed. At church, Emma wore a scarf around her neck to cover the bruise Richard had left the night before. When the pastor's wife complimented her scarf, Emma smiled weakly. No one knew the truth, that under the pretty fabric was a painful reminder of her husband's rage. One night, Emma accidentally dropped a plate while serving dinner. Richard's face darkened instantly. "You're useless, Emma. Can't you do anything right?" He slapped her so hard she fell against the table. The plate shards cut her hand, and she cried out. Richard froze, then knelt beside her. "I'm sorry, baby. I didn't mean it." Emma sobbed quietly, but inside she thought, "How long can I keep living like this?" Laura invited Emma for lunch. As Emma lifted her cup, Laura noticed a bruise on her wrist. "Emma, I need you to be honest. Is Richard hurting you?" Emma's hands trembled. "Laura, please don't ask me that." Laura reached across the table. "You don't deserve this. If he's hurting you, you need to leave." Emma's eyes filled with tears, but she whispered, "I can't." Richard bought Emma a new dress, flowers, and perfume. "See, I take care of you," he said proudly. Emma forced a smile but thought to herself, "What use are gifts when your hands bruise me?" The apologies were empty now. She no longer believed his promises. One evening, Margaret visited unannounced. She saw Emma's swollen lip. "Emma," she gasped, "don't lie to me anymore. Richard is beating you, isn't he?" Emma broke down in her mother's arms. Margaret's eyes hardened. "If he touches you again, I will not sit quietly." Richard came home drunk one night, his breath heavy with alcohol. "Why isn't the food ready?" he shouted. Emma explained softly that it was on the stove, but before she could finish, he punched her in the stomach. She fell to the floor, gasping for air. That night, Emma lay awake, pain shooting through her body, and whispered to herself, "I can't do this anymore." Emma began to save money secretly. Every time Richard gave her money for groceries, she kept a little aside. She hid it in a small box under her clothes. She knew she needed a plan. She couldn't tell Laura or even her mother yet. But she promised herself, one day she would leave. Richard became more controlling. He checked her phone, restricted her visits to her mother, and accused her of lying whenever she stepped outside. "You belong to me," he told her. Emma nodded outwardly, but inside, her determination to escape grew stronger. Margaret noticed Emma's fear and decided to confront Richard. One Sunday, she visited and spoke to him directly. "Richard, if you ever lay your hands on my daughter again, you will answer to me." Richard smirked. "She's my wife, Mrs. Brown. Stay out of our business." But Margaret's eyes were cold. "She may be your wife, but she's my child, and I will protect her." One stormy night, Richard beat Emma so badly that blood streamed from her nose. She lay on the floor crying as he shouted, "You made me do this!" Something snapped inside Emma. She realized if she stayed, one day he might kill her. At dawn, with trembling hands, Emma packed a small bag. She took her savings, her ID, and left the house quietly. She walked to her mother's house, tears streaming down her face. When Margaret opened the door and saw her daughter, bruised and broken, she pulled her into her arms. "You're safe now, Emma. You're safe." When Richard came to Margaret's house later that day, demanding Emma return, Margaret stood firmly in the doorway. "She's not going anywhere with you. Not this time." Richard's face darkened, but Margaret did not move. Emma stood behind her mother, trembling but resolute. For the first time, she felt the strength of safety. She knew the journey ahead would be hard, but one thing was clear. She would never again allow Richard to break her spirit. Emma stayed with her mother, Margaret, 4 weeks. Margaret nursed her wounds, both physical and emotional. "You don't need him, Emma," she said firmly. "A real man protects, not destroys." Emma cried often, but in her mother's house she felt a safety she hadn't known in years. Richard called endlessly. Sometimes he begged, "Emma, come home. I'll change, I swear." Other times he threatened, "If you don't return, you'll regret it." Emma ignored his calls, but her heart raced each time the phone rang. Margaret eventually took the phone and told him, "Stay away from my daughter, or you'll face the law." Laura visited and hugged Emma tightly. "I knew something was wrong," she whispered. Emma sobbed in her friend's arms. Laura encouraged her to speak to a counselor. "You've been through trauma, Emma. You need to heal." Emma nodded slowly, realizing she could no longer carry her pain in silence. Emma began counseling sessions. For the first time, she spoke openly. "My husband beat me. I thought love meant staying no matter what. But I was wrong." The counselor looked at her kindly. "Emma, you survived. That shows strength. Now, it's time to rebuild yourself." Emma left the session feeling lighter. With her mother's encouragement, Emma went to the police. She showed them photos of her bruises and gave a statement. The officers assured her they would summon Richard. Emma trembled as she signed the papers, but deep inside, she felt a spark of courage. When the police confronted Richard, he laughed. "My wife is lying. She just wants to ruin me." But witnesses, like Mrs. Carter, the neighbor who had heard shouting, came forward. Richard's confidence began to crack as evidence piled against him. Emma stood in court, her hands trembling as she faced Richard. He glared at her, but she lifted her chin. "Richard hurt me. He broke me. But I refuse to stay silent anymore." Her words echoed in the courtroom. Margaret and Laura sat behind her, their eyes filled with pride. The judge's voice was firm. "Richard Brown, you are guilty of domestic violence. You will serve your sentence and receive mandatory counseling." Richard's face darkened, but Emma felt tears of relief stream down her cheeks. Justice at last. With Richard out of her life, Emma slowly found herself again. She joined a women's support group where survivors shared their stories. "You are not alone," one woman told her, squeezing her hand. Emma realized she was part of a sisterhood of strength. Emma decided to speak publicly about her experience. At a church seminar, she stood before young women and said, "Love is not supposed to hurt. If anyone lays their hands on you, it is not love." The crowd was silent, many wiping tears. For the first time, Emma felt her pain had a purpose. Emma took a course in business management, something she had always wanted. With Margaret's support, she started a small bakery business. "You can do this," Margaret encouraged her. Customers loved her cakes, and soon Emma's bakery became popular. She was no longer just surviving, she was thriving. Months later, Richard's sister, Clara, visited Emma. "I want to apologize for my brother," she said softly. "He destroyed you, but I see how strong you've become. You're an inspiration." Emma accepted her words with grace but replied, "His choices were his own. I just choose not to let them define me anymore." Emma's bakery introduced her to new friends, including Michael, a kind-hearted man who admired her resilience. They talked often, but Emma told him, "I'm not ready for love again." Michael smiled gently. "I'm not asking for love, Emma. Just friendship." For the first time, she realized not all men were like Richard. As years passed, Emma healed. She laughed more, smiled freely, and found peace in her independence. She no longer flinched at loud voices or lived in constant fear. One evening, while sitting with her mother, she whispered, "I never thought I'd get here, Mum. But I'm finally free." Margaret kissed her forehead. "You're stronger than you'll ever know, Emma." Standing outside her bakery on a bright morning, Emma watched happy customers leaving with cakes in their hands. She breathed deeply, the air filled with hope. Her scars had not disappeared, but they no longer defined her. She was no longer the woman beaten by her husband. She was Emma Brown, the survivor, the businesswoman, the woman who turned pain into power. For Emma, the end of her marriage was not the end of her life. It was the beginning of a brighter, stronger, freer story.